everyone. Welcome to the show today. I am super excited to welcome Jocelyn and Aaron Freeman. They're known as the Freemans, right? Okay, they are authors of The New Power Couple and The Argument Hangover, and they are the founders of Empowered Couples University. Which, check this out, it's an online university where busy couples unlearn unhealthy patterns and gain modern relationship skills. We could all benefit from that. So I'm excited to have them. Welcome to the show, Jocelyn and Aaron. Great to have you.
Thanks so much for having us. We're
Yeah,
excited
thanks,
to be
Alan.
here.
Yeah, so you guys are, to be honest, a little different guests. Like, well, super accomplished authors. I've had authors, speakers, presenters, all of this stuff, but you guys are marriage experts. Can I call you that?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. Relationships, partnership, marriage.
Okay. That's awesome. So tell me a little bit about how you guys got started. Obviously, you're entrepreneurs, you're business owners, you're obviously partners, and we're going to be talking a lot about that today, about how business partnerships are a lot like marriages. And I just had another thought that I'd like to cover if we can get to it. And that is how when business partnerships break up, it's almost like a divorce. So, but let's start with where you guys started and how you got interested in this field.
Yeah, well, I love your podcast theme talking about entrepreneurship and especially early stage, because I remember vividly what it was like to leave the safety of corporate America and then jump into entrepreneurship. And we did that early in our marriage. Like, we were engaged and had started building a health and wellness business. And then shortly after getting married, number one, we really prepared for marriage quite a bit. We invested in that. And we found that most people weren't. And we also heard people just say, like, well, we'll just go to counseling when things get bad. And really the only options that were out there that people thought of or went to was counseling. So we said there's something missing in the marketplace about taking the same mentality that people have in terms of personal development, working on themselves before crisis, and bring that into the relationship space. So early in our marriage, we wrote our initial book and really started coaching couples. And now we're almost 6 years into it full time and love entrepreneurship, love our business, but we just saw a missing in the marketplace. And it was something we were really passionate about. And now we're loving it still years later.
Yeah, that's incredible. And I think that's right. And we just celebrated our 14th wedding anniversary.
Awesome. Congrats.
And there are so many correlations between a marriage and a business. I always tell people that when I'm looking for a business partner, and my listeners know I have quite a few, and I wouldn't be able to get to where I wouldn't have been able to get to where I am today without them. There's no question. I would be somewhere, but I wouldn't be where I am today. And you know, on the trajectory that I am without my business partners. And it's the same with my wife. And it's one of those things is, as I'm building businesses and I'm creating new businesses, new opportunities, I'm constantly looking for new partners. And one of the main skill or ability of a partner that I am looking for is somebody that is not going to give up, somebody that it doesn't put on rose-colored glasses and say, hey, this is the greatest business idea in the world. We're not going to have any issues, but somebody that wakes up every morning and says, hey, I'm going to work on my partnership. I'm going to work on my relationship with my partner, and we're going to figure this out. And I've noticed that in my marriage that hasn't been without problem, right? Without issue and complication, that when we approach it like that it's like, hey, it's a new day. We're going to try again. We're not giving up. We never say the D word. And so I'm looking for partners that are like that. Do you guys see that as a necessary skill in a marriage?
It's like resilience is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, for sure. In a marriage, I was thinking about the business as you were talking about it with a partner. I think even taking that one step further would be broadening your time frame. And think, if I get into a business partnership with someone, I realize I am not the person that I will be in this business partnership in a year, 2 years, 3 years. So you know that, hey, if we're aligned on our vision for this thing, our values, I think a key thing for both marriage and business partnership is having agreements. But with all those things, you have to say, the person I'm getting into this partnership with, you're not going to be the same person in 6 months, in a year, in 3 years, and I'm not going to be. Do we align on that? And are we even excited about growing into those types of people to fulfill on the vision for the business that we're here to do? And it's the same for a marriage. That's what often gets missed in the marriage. People don't realize that this is the biggest place for you to grow as an individual. So you're not going to be the same person. Your partner's not going to be the same person. And until you accept that and then say, I want to go on that journey with you where we both become different people together, now all of a sudden you're in a different wavelength.
I love that idea. And it's so true, both in a marriage from what I've experienced and in business. It is so true. And not only do we need to embrace that with our partners, we have to encourage it, right? And so many times I wish I had a nickel for every time I heard one of my partners say, but you said, referring to 5 years ago, that we were going to do this, and things had changed because circumstances had changed, because I had changed, because my partner had changed, right? What is the most productive way to address that concept, that specific concept of, hey, my partner and in my marriage, or my relationship, my romantic relationship, how do we approach that in a way where we welcome that type of change without these preconceived expectations that get in the way of our personal development?
So I want to address it in a couple of ways. One, I love that you said the word expectations, because one of the root causes of challenges in all relationships, romantic, business, but even with like these expectations are coming up for me about our parents, because we're about to have a child. And so thinking about how they should be showing up as a grandparent. And so expectations are very sneaky, but here's the thing, it's not really possible to eliminate expectations. So in your business partnership relationship, because that's what we're focusing on today, you're going to have expectations of each other. But what people do is kind of like test each other, like, oh, let's just see if they kind of like anticipate my needs, or if we're on this, if we're on the same wavelength, maybe they'll get the memo. And that just doesn't work. It sets you both up for failure. So what we truly believe for all relationships to thrive is to have very honest and as proactive as possible conversations about expectations, not just once, but checking in on them frequently with each other. So we do this in both a romantic context and because we are business partners. Hey, what are our expectations coming up into this next season? We're talking about that with parenting coming up here soon, but also our business. Hey, what are our new expectations of each other now that we're going to be parents together and in business together? Because otherwise they're just going to run in the background, and we only are set up for being disappointed and frustrated with the person. And then that's when people lash out or they cut the person out. Oh, we're just going to break, we're going to end this business partnership, when maybe some of those business partnerships could have been salvaged and could have existed.
Let's take it one step further, not just salvage. When you actually dive into the harder conversations, you strengthen the relationship. Let's get real about that. We're not here to salvage or just to thrive, but
survive, not just survive.
To survive, but to really strengthen. You actually have to lean in as a partnership into the challenges, into the places to grow, into the places that your feelings got hurt, where you had an expectation, it didn't go the way you thought. And when you go in there together, it really is more like military brothers, right? They go into a battle.
For sure.
That's a challenge. And when they come out, they have created a bond because of what they went through, and they came out of it stronger. And that's always available for all relationships. It's just sometimes too easy to avoid the challenge, so you miss the opportunity.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. This idea of having these conversations, and a lot of times if you can catch them ahead of time, right? So you have a feeling, hey, I don't like the way this is headed. I don't like what my partner has pivoted, to start focusing on or whatever, and catching those up front versus years down the road, right?
Mhm.
How do you approach that conversation with a partner that is like, you know what? Nope, this is the type of partner you were. These are the duties that you were performing, 5 years ago. This is what I've expected of you the entire time that we're in business. We didn't talk about change. How do you approach a partner that has kind of that mindset about change?
Yeah, interesting
It
question.
it is so funny how many correlations there are to marriage. So if this was even a conversation with a couple, I would say, well, you always start with your positive intent. And I believe it's the same here, right? So if you had something you wanted to bring up because roles are changing in the business, you could come to your business partner and say, hey, here's what I'm not liking. But if you do that, it immediately puts them on the defensive. Same with a romantic partner. So you want to start the conversation from a higher level about what's the positive intent you have or the benefit for what the business is about, the purpose, the mission, the vision of the business. So, hey, Alan, I know we've been in business, for 5 years now. And we both are committed to really creating the highest level of service for the people that are our customers, as well as I know innovation. And I want to have a conversation to make sure that we stay on that path together.
Mhm.
So notice how you're setting up. Here's the positive reason I want to have this conversation. And you also said we're a team.
Mhm.
So now you're both looking at this together. No one's on the defensive. And then you might say, I think there's been some patterns in the role that you've been playing. I don't know if it leads to innovation, or maybe you have some sort of new idea about how to best serve your clients, and maybe your business partner hasn't been doing that, or maybe they didn't think of it. But either way, you're now a team saying, here's where we want to go for the business, and you don't make it so personal.
Yeah, that's funny because it reminds me of when I went to law school quite a few years ago, and I remember I started becoming really good friends with people that had the opposite political beliefs that I had. Okay. And they were such good people, to this day, some of my best friends. And I realized that we had such different approaches to solve similar issues. And before I was thinking, oh, that, they're just, we don't have the same end goal in mind, and it's not just how the approach is to get us there. And I realized, hey, these are some of the best people in the world that just think completely differently, but we're trying to end up at the same spot. Why, right? We're trying to end up with, government that's producing benefits for the people, or whatever the case is, right? And as I got involved in business, the same thing happened with my business partners. We had the same goal. We had the same end goal in mind. We wanted to create a successful company that had great culture, that employed great people, that had great vision, that created jobs, for people that really wanted to work there, and added to their quality of life. But man, we had different ideas about how to get there. Right.
Yeah, well, can I jump in on that?
Absolutely.
Because two things. One is that the point of communication is not to always agree. And communication, we all know, is key to all relationships. It's like a cliche, communication is key. But truly, anyone who wants to be in business, even alone or with a partner, you need to become a better communicator. And great communicators are not measured by how well they communicate when people agree with them. Great communicators are measured by how well they communicate with someone who doesn't agree with them. And so that's a skill that I want to challenge everyone listening, is I'm going to take on more communication skills, especially when people don't agree with me, because that's where the art of negotiation comes in. That's where the art of influence, being able to influence someone and be influenced. Maybe, if you're rigid, and this would be a whole other line of conversation that we probably don't have time for, but if you fall into a more inflexible communication personality type, because we have 4 communication personality types, you can assume your perspective is right and then not accept the others, when actually, what if you could be really benefited by changing your perspective, by taking on some of the feedback that they're adding in, The second piece I wanted to bring up, right? So it's communication in those times when you don't agree, but also in marriage and in business, having clear roles, having clear agreements. And sometimes if you're stepping on each other's toes, if there's power struggles, someone had once even kind of said, oh, make it the 51-49 principle, meaning let's say you in your companies were in charge of HR. Well, if you're 51% of that decision making and they're 49, at the end of the day, you get to make the decision and they trust you, because in a relationship, right, marriage or business, there's got to be trust. But then let's say the other person, they own finances and they have 51% ownership of that. Well, at the end of the day, then you need to trust them. And I think these power struggles and these battles come in when everyone's trying to be always 50-50.
Right.
Of course, you want input, because I already talked about that with communication, being able to take on their perspective. But if trust is there and you know who owns what areas, like I trust Aaron with our finances. He gives me an update, check in. Hey, here's an overview. At the end of the day, he makes the financial decisions, whereas I make other ones. So that is a really key. What are our roles? What do we each own? 51-49. And then do we trust each other?
Yeah, I mean, compromise is such a big word, both in marriage and in a business partnership. How does somebody that, let's say I'm the person that, I'm in charge 51% of our finances, right? But there's a decision that comes up and my partner and we're at odds about this decision, big decision. Okay. Could alter the future of the company. And I'm, 60% sure that I'm right. Right. I'm not positive. In that scenario, do I give deference to my partner? Do I compromise? Do I say, like, hey, let's go with what he thinks in this scenario, or she thinks? What I guess what I'm trying to get at is, how do we know when to compromise? Right. Sometimes, and I've done this before, where I've let upper level management in one of my companies, make a decision that I knew was wrong. I knew it, but I needed them to learn that it was wrong. Right. How do we do that in partnerships? How do we decide if we have the controlling decision, but we're going to say, hey, this may go wrong, but just to show that I trust the person, that I value their input, that I'm listening to them, I'm going to go ahead and make the decision that they're proposing.
I've got something to do.
Go ahead.
I'll jump in and then see what you want to add. So I want to readdress the trust piece and trusting that if they do own it, like you said, and I love that you said this, sometimes people need to learn on their own. We also would even broaden the perspective in terms of, what if there aren't really right or wrong decisions? There's actually just decisions that and outcomes that help you clarify whether you're on track for the vision or not. There have been things that appeared to be a good decision, then had a negative impact, and then vice versa. Things that appeared to be maybe not the best decision had a great impact. So I think in life, we, number one, can't always control circumstances and outcomes. And that's why trusting people, trusting life, trusting the business. I'd also say that I want to switch the word from compromise to being more creative.
Okay.
And so if there really is a big decision, because what I'm hearing in your question is, the smaller things are a little bit easier to let go, but like big things that feel like could be big turning points or big breakdowns for the business, sometimes we're either arguing over or just thinking about only two ideas when there are infinite possibilities. And we find that people don't step enough into creativity. And we see this with couples all the time. They're arguing over two different parenting decisions when it's like there's 100 you could really make in this situation.
Great point.
So we're big fans of getting your whiteboard out. We know as entrepreneurs, you have your whiteboard.
Yes, absolutely.
You say, what's the decision or what's the problem? What is the thing we're working on? And then literally together, whether it's 2 people, 10 people, what are all the possible steps we could take? and then together, which decision feels better? Because personally, we've never used the word compromise in our marriage, in our business.
Okay.
It's just not a word that resonates for us. We find that if we can get creative, that there's 99.9% of the time always a win-win solution.
I love that. So it actually made me think of something when we're kind of going back to this trust issue. I think as partners, sometimes we have to trust not just the ability or whether the decision is the right one, but we have to trust the intent of our partners. We have to, right? We're not, if I think about it, it's like, hey, am I going to give a little more leeway here because I trust that his intent is in the right spot, his heart's in the right spot, for the betterment of the company. Is that fair to say? Or is the trust always in the ability to solve the issue or whatever the case may be?
I mean, it definitely depends on the role too, right? Because if you're dealing with finances, you want someone that's very structured, very logical, very binary. But if you're talking about someone that's dealing with other customers, it really is the same type of conversation. Like maybe I need to ask more questions about some of our clients. What if I go back to some of the customers that we didn't serve that well, and I authentically said, hey, I didn't remember, we didn't meet our mark. Would you mind sharing more about what we could have done better, right? So I think asking more questions, but knowing the type of role, I think also lets you know, am I like in the left brain? Am I in the right brain? If I'm dealing with relationships, maybe I need to be more in the heart rather than just logic, number based. It's black and white. So I don't think it's as specific as that, but knowing what is the particular role, and then, hate to say it to sound general, but the vision of the relationship. Of the business, because we actually saw in the beginning where a marriage is very much like a successful business is that there is a collaborative vision. And it's one of the things we do with couples. But I think in business, it can be one of those catchphrase type words like, oh, what is our vision? But if you're really clear about what it is you do, why you're passionate and inspired by that, you can come back to that and use that. Like, does the decision that we feel like we're about to make, is that on the path? Is that in alignment to the vision that we have? And a lot of times for us, if let's say I was you and I was 60% sure in my logical mind, and I got together with Jocelyn and we thought, we're not 100% sure, but this does feel an alignment. It really feels like an alignment. And there's something that happens like in your body or in your heart that says, I don't have the answer. It feels like this is an alignment. Let's go with that. And I think at the end of the day, if you've made decisions from there, I don't know that you can go wrong per se.
I love that. I agree 100%. I think, I talk about vision a lot. I talk about core values a lot. And I think when you have a collaborative vision, as cliche as that may sound, it just gives you a roadmap, and that vision may change over time. Right. But as it helps you make decisions. And I'm working with our marketing director and on a project right now. And I keep bringing her back. Is this consistent with our vision? And I think in your relationship with your partners, when you're talking about big decisions, bringing it back, hey, is this consistent with our vision? If it's not, do we need to change our vision? Right. It doesn't just, close the conversation there, but I wanted to shift gears real quick.
I'm just going to add one quick thing on that. I think this could be different for the business side of things, where for a relationship, we have couples decide on not just the activities, but what experience do they want to have collaboratively with their life? And
like
I think
the feeling of things.
Yeah, I think that it could be something that could be added to a business, because a vision statement might have, who you serve, what the activities are, what the outcome is, but maybe adding in, how do we want to feel? What do we want to experience as an organization, as a team? And for us, ours is collaboration, joy, and massive contribution. So that experience also guides us. And maybe that would be beneficial for an organization to say, we're here all the time. We give so much effort and focus to this. What do we want to experience? Like, do we want to experience some playfulness, some joy, some service, some contribution? It might also help with it being like a guiding light.
I like that idea because there's so much power and motivation that comes from feeling, right? So if you're not chasing a number, right? Numbers they don't have any feeling, which sometimes that's why I like dealing with numbers. But if you set up like these parameters and you're like, hey, these are the experiences that we want to have, I think that's great, and it's something that it can be unique, right? We're not all going to react the same to the same, set of events. But if we share that, I think that really binds us to our partners, and, kind of going back to your analogy of, members of the military in a foxhole or something, like you've gone through hell together. So that is a way to develop that relationship. I wanted to ask you guys, with a lot of my businesses, my main business partner is my brother. And it's challenging, right? Because you have to separate this, and I'm a year and a half older than him. So I spent all this time with him, and we have all these other things that affect our partnership. How do couples or other relatives set up a business successfully? How do they define roles? How do they define how they're going to talk to each other in front of others, or even when others aren't around? How do they do that successfully without letting all these other emotions that are involved in a relationship outside of the business come into play?
Gosh, there's so much I want to say. And part of me wants to know what feels challenging to you. Have you shared with your audience what feels challenging about being in business with your brother?
Yeah, I think the big part is everything that goes on in our lives that connect us that don't have anything to do with the business. So yes. He and I might argue about something that, one of our siblings is going through, and it doesn't have anything to do with the business. But then right after we're arguing about, how our sibling should handle a scenario, then we're like, oh, by the way, what are we going to do about our office in Michigan? Right. Yeah. And so I think one of the biggest issues that I have is separating those roles. Am I talking to him as my brother, or am I talking to him as my business partner?
Yeah, I love that. And thanks for sharing with us and with the audience. Gosh, I mean, I could spend 30 minutes on this one because I think this is such a juicy question. First off, you're going to always be human. And I think people want business to feel like you can really segment. There's business time and personal time.
Like take off the hat, put on the business owner hat, right?
And I can share, there's one particular tool that we provide for couples that I'll share in a moment that can help move towards that segmented time. But first, we just have to we're going to be human, and emotions are part of it. Now, this would tie into our second book, is called The Argument Hangover. And part of why there can be, we call it clutter in the way between relationships, is because people don't resolve things. And so if you don't resolve a conversation, meaning acknowledge each other's emotions, acknowledge each other's perspectives, and say, sometimes it is getting to an agreement, and sometimes it's, hey, I see your perspective and you see mine, and that's where it's going to be. If that completion doesn't happen, there will be emotional clutter that then goes into the next conversation. So again, going back to mastering communication skills, everyone really should get better at conflict resolution and how to fully resolve the conversations, which I addressed a couple things. How do you each feel? You have to be willing to, all right, I get it. You're frustrated. Okay, I understand. You don't feel respected. That then going, all right, do you feel like we've resolved it enough to move to the next topic? And I think that we're investors in a food company. And one of the things we love about the founder is she's all about being human with her employees, with her contractors. It's not just all about being sterile and we just need to be professional. I think the days of that are going away a bit more in business because we just are human. And so sometimes it needs to be, let's have the emotional conversation. Let's get it resolved. Then let's come back to the logical things. So I just wanted to share that premise. Now getting to a tool. what we believe is it's powerful to have specific times to discuss certain things, where a lot of people can kind of blindside each other.
Yes.
Couples do this to each other. They walk into the kitchen, surprise, I know you're making dinner, but I want to talk about this really important issue that I know you're not mentally prepared for.
Well, they don't say all that. They just start in with, why didn't you, where did that $150 go? And they're like, over here cooking dinner.
Right. Or in business, right? It's you're about to have a meeting for something else and you blindside them with, hey, let's talk about what's going on with our sibling. And so if you're bringing in those topics at times that aren't the best space for the conversation, it could derail you. And so we tell couples, instead of just surprising your partner with these topics, we believe in having a weekly family meeting. So that's your time to discuss your intimacy, your finances, just your relationship.
You can mentally
overall.
like gear up for it, right? You're like, okay, here comes the weekly meeting. We're going to be talking about tough topics. I'm not going to be caught off guard because this is what we do. I know we're going to be talking about these things. So mentally, emotionally, you can kind of gear up for it.
Exactly. So then in business as well, it can be, because you two are brothers, hey, let's have certain times we talk about family stuff that's outside of work hours, for example, or hey, if we're about to go into a business meeting, let's just not bring up those personal matters. Again, it may not always be possible because we're human, but those segmented times can be helpful.
Yeah, no, I think that's such great advice. And I just, as you were talking, I was thinking about past events where we would get into an argument about something unrelated, and then we have to like change our face because we have a meeting in front of 20 people. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And it just really deflates the energy, demotivates us. And so I think that's a great idea to kind of schedule a time where, hey, and I'm guilty of it too, where especially the hot topics, right? Something that I'm getting emotional about. I want to talk about it right now, right? It just happened. I just had an issue with an employee, or, my mom just called. Like, I want to talk about this right now and get this taken care of right now, when my partner's mind is somewhere else. He may be golfing. He may be, doing training. He may be, and just getting on the same page. I think mentally, I think that's a great idea.
Yeah. Love that. Awesome.
So this has been fantastic, guys. I can tell that you have this wealth of knowledge in the relationship arena, and business as well. Where do my listeners go to find out more about all these great projects that you're involved in?
Oh, thanks. Well, for relationships, again, both personal and business, you can definitely benefit from reading our newest book, The Argument Hangover. Just hit shelves. It was fun. Even though we had to wear masks because of all the lockdown, we got to go sign copies at Barnes & Noble, which was really fun. So The Argument Hangover, and you can actually get some additional bonuses, a course, a workbook at theargumenthangover.com just by entering your receipt number there, and you get immediate access to those bonuses. And then also, since they're podcast listeners, our podcast is the Empowered Couples Podcast. And we're also really social on Instagram, Meet the Freemans. So I'd say theargumenthangover.com, Empowered Couples Podcast, and then Meet the Freemans on Instagram.
I love it. Well, thanks so much for your time. I appreciate talking about this subject that frankly entrepreneurs we like to avoid sometimes. Sometimes we just want to look at a spreadsheet and work on the numbers. So but this is so important, not just to the financial well-being of a company, but to the emotional well-being and the future of a company. So thanks so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having us.
If you have enjoyed today's podcast, please leave us a rating. And for daily inspiration and business tips, follow Alan on Instagram. Until next time, remember, we build the future one entrepreneur at a time.